Their power is loud. Their voices project the authority they feel in this space. They are in the temple, the place where holy people just such as themselves belong. There is no hesitation, no questioning whether they can interrupt the teacher and his morning Torah study, no pondering whether they should. They are the teachers of the people, and they have a lesson of their own that will be heard and felt. In her vulnerability, she is silent, dragged before a crowd that will see her shame, underdressed, disheveled, sticky with sweat. The scent of the act she was caught in still follows her. They present their accusation loudly enough for all to hear. They don't care to preserve her dignity. They don't offer her a trial with 2 or 3 witnesses as the law requires. They quote a law that applies equally to 2 parties, but they only needed 1 for their purposes today, so they don't bring her partner to face this shame with her. She stands alone. She doesn't speak up to protest her plight, maybe to protect her lover, maybe because she is too frightened and ashamed. But the woman is silent, as the Pharisees and scribes use her as live bait to try to trap their true quarry, the prey they have been hunting ever since they began to hear the word Messiah attached to his name. She is inconsequential in the larger political, religious battle for power they are fighting. Jesus is quieter with his power. He doesn't meet their noise and aggression in kind. He is not required to answer their questions. Their forcefulness and haste do not push him to greater urgency or panic. This temple belongs to him. And so he remains unflustered, unwavering, existing in the space where he most belongs. Jesus takes note of the scene and pauses to doodle on the ground instead of dignifying their interruption to his lesson with an urgent response. They do not let their question go unanswered. They know that their trap is perfect. The rabbi is known for uplifting the marginalized and for his strict moral codes, and so now they ask him to weigh the fate of a woman. They quote the law of Moses that says that she must die, even as they know that Rome does not allow the Jewish people to exert capital authority in Jerusalem. Finally, after much badgering, he stands to look at them. He meets their eyes. He has been asked repeatedly a question about this woman's sin, and he responds with an inference about their own sin. That sense of comfort and belonging and power in the space isn't so strong in the face of his answer. The Pharisees and scribes squirm and their voices falter. The elders are the first to break the ensuing silence with the sound of their retreating footsteps. And our victim of tragic circumstance is left alone with Jesus. There is a long history of reading and teaching about this woman. There have been times in history where people preferred to ignore her existence altogether because she might give people the idea that they can be sinful and still loved. Some people have read this text and said, Jesus should have been more harsh with this woman. She is a sinner. In our modern day, we tend to read her with more compassion. We tend to recognize this story as a beautiful depiction of mercy. But still, even in this time when we tend to see her as vulnerable, as someone who is a victim of people in power abusing that power to use her, we still call her the woman caught in adultery. We still identify her in the exact same way her accusers do. We could just as easily call this the story of the abusive religious leaders, as Amy Smith Carman suggests, or the story of the abused woman, the story of the forgiven woman, the story of the rescued woman. But even today, with our modern sensibilities, if you want people to know which story you're talking about, you call her the adulterous woman. Even now, as we read her as a victim, that is the bent of many modern scholars who read this woman, because this narrative makes it very clear that the Pharisees and scribes are not pursuing justice or righteousness here. They have reduced a woman who they deemed expendable to a pawn in their game to trap a man. She is in a very tragic and pitiable situation. She is nameless, vulnerable to the power plays of the men around her, helpless to their whims. And we don't know very much about her story. We know some things from history. We know that the laws around sexual ethics for first century Jewish women are a lot more like property laws than our modern ears are comfortable with. We know that she has limited options to protect herself if her husband has abused or mistreated her in some way. We know that even if he abandons her, she is not free to be with another man until he releases her with a certificate of divorce. We know that the law calls for both parties to an affair to stand a formal trial with witnesses. And she is standing here alone, her partner nowhere to be found, though they were caught in the act, so his identity should be known, and this spectacle does not begin to approach a fair trial. And so we are left to wonder, and wonder we do. Among modern scholars and preachers who rightly recognize that this woman is a victim of an unjust system and of men at the top of that system who are ready to use their power to claim more, we love to ask a lot of questions about this woman. What if her husband abused or abandoned her? Why is her lover nowhere to be found? Did he betray her? What if she was falsely accused? Why is she standing alone if this is not some sort of setup? What if? Why? What if? And so as I read commentaries and articles to inform a sermon, I got really excited. I was ready to write a sermon full of these what-if statements, a sermon to vindicate our helpless victim who has been forced to carry the shameful name of adulteress for hundreds of years. And then I went back to the text, and I hit a small snag, okay, a big snag for the plan that I had, because the biblical text is very clear that this woman is guilty of what they say she is. They accuse her of adultery, and she did it. They caught her in the act. The text is clear that they are not here for justice. They are using her as a pawn to trap another man. But they are not lying about her sin. She did it. And finding that so clearly in the text left me with a question for myself. Why was I so excited for her to be innocent? Why are scholars and preachers who follow our instincts to join Jesus in protecting this woman so ready to look for an explanation that clears her name that isn't present in the text? We have identified a victim in need of protection, and we want her to be perfect, pristine. We want to paint her picture the way we paint the Virgin Mary moments after giving birth, kneeling with that peaceful, pious look on her face, wearing a crisply pressed cobalt blue robe, the white headdress. No drop of sweat, no stench or trace of bodily fluids to mar a holy woman, whatever had happened in the moments preceding our painting. But that is not the honest picture that we find here. The text is clear that her accusers are not working in pursuit of justice. It is clear that she is a victim of their evil intentions. And it also makes no dispute concerning her guilt. Jesus recognizes that there is sin in her life that she needs to leave behind. But that doesn't give us the perfect victim that we want. We don't want to gaze at a trembling, naked woman with bruised arms from how men have dragged her from the bed where she laid in sin. We want the pristine Virgin Mary, not a woman marred like Eve or Tamar. That picture is just too messy for church. We want her to be a victim or a villain. We want her to deserve recompense or reproach. We want her to be abused or adulterous. And she, in all of her simplicity and complications, in all of her humanity, is both a marginalized, vulnerable woman in need of compassion and protection, and a guilty woman in desperate need of mercy. She is human, bearing the image of her Creator. She is what they say, and so much more. Jesus sees her sin and her need to leave it behind. And it does not change his compassion for her plight, his outrage at her abuse, his choice to protect her. Sometimes we would prefer our victims to be clean, spotless, above reproach. We don't want to read a story that suggests that we need to protect sinners. We know that she is treated wrongly. And so we want this accusation against her to be false or justifiable somehow, so that we can love her. Because as a society, we want people to look and behave in dignified ways before we offer them human dignity. We want our victims that we defend to be worthy of our efforts. We don't want to be marred by association with messy, guilty people. And so we want our victims of sexual violence to be blameless and pure, without a hint of promiscuity or drunkenness. And so we ask them questions like, what were you wearing? So that we can decide if they are worthy of justice and protection. We don't want to defend a drug addict from racial violence. No, we want our victims to be pristine, above reproach, upstanding citizens, with perfect church attendance. We don't want to protect felons from abusive prison guards, or undocumented migrants from abusive policing and wrongful imprisonment. That just gets too messy. Once their paperwork is in order, once their time is served, when the victims are perfect and blameless, then we are ready to love them. If they aren't perfect, how can we know that they don't deserve it? A little bit. How can we defend the humanity and rights of people with whom we don't perfectly agree 100% of the time? That gets very messy. It's a lot easier on us if we protect clean, pristine victims, the ones who work in helping professions, who never got a speeding ticket, the ones that we can place on a pedestal, people of whom we can make perfect icons to hang up with the martyrs. We don't have to think nearly as much about that. We don't have to worry if others will find us guilty or shameful by association. We don't want to see the humanity of suffering, messy people. If we do, we might have to acknowledge that we still owe sinful, messy people love and safety. We might have to notice that oppressive systems make it harder to stay on the straight and narrow, that cleanliness is often a mark of the privilege of having had good options. We might have to confront that we bear a social responsibility to people even when they are still carrying the scent of their sins on them. The truth Jesus shows us here, and speaking to a thief on a cross, is that whether a person is promiscuous or chaste, addicted or sober, guilty or innocent, they are still a person, still human, still bearing the image of our God, still deserving of justice and fairness, and yes, even love. Our silent woman is an imperfect victim. She is messy and broken and bruised. And that is where we find her at the end of our story, standing alone, as those who attempted to claim authority over the proceedings at the temple scatter. The epitome of power is still left gazing on the weakness of a pathetic and suffering woman. The one who will soon become the most perfect and pristine victim, the quintessential martyr, is face to face with a mess. A victim who carries guilt and shame and trauma from a system that is stacked against her and has been weaponized against her in the worst ways. And Jesus, the perfect martyr, the one who is blameless in his victimhood, who could point a finger, instead shamed her abusers and sent them packing. And he sees her in all of her brokenness and beauty, in all of her tarnished glory. Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? No one, sir. Neither do I condemn you. If you would like to respond to this mercy, to receive it or to join in extending it to our messy world, I invite you to come forward as we sing.